Well, this is one of those topics in our course that everybody kind of knows we have to talk about, but most of us aren't super excited about it. But there's a growing realization in modeling and simulation that if we don't really understand information assurance, it's going to really hamper our ability to get products in the hands of the people who really need them. We got to live on military networks. They have critical infrastructure, critical information assurance issues, and we got to play by their rules. We got to find ways of not working around them so much as playing by those rules and figuring out new and innovative ways of getting our products out. So that's what this module is going to be about, just a sort of a high-level view just to make you aware of some of the issues, and you'll see in a little bit more detail what sorts of things we might be able to do. So our agenda is we're going to talk about what information assurance is, and then we're going to talk about what is the global information grid. That, of course, is the thing that we're trying to protect, because everything, all of our information systems connect to it. And then if there's one thing you're going to walk out of this particular module with, just know what DIACAP is. DoD Information Assurance Certification and Accreditation Process. There's a website for it. We'll show it to you. And you need to take a look at it. It's a great resource for folks who really need to pay attention to information assurance but aren't information assurance experts. So we're just going to give you a snapshot of it in this module, but you need to know what DIACAP is and how to get information when you need it. So first we talk about two different definitions of information assurance, and I'll leave it to you to read them both. But the gist of it is that we're talking about not just keeping viruses off of our network or denial of service attacks and things like that. We're talking about the availability, the integrity, the authentication, confidentiality, and non-repudiation of, this is the integrity of the entire IT infrastructure on which all of DoD runs. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about you're in the science and technology domain, you're operational, you're in acquisition, you're on the business end. We're all hooked together in one way. And as you'll see when we get to talking about the gig next, that's the thing that connects us all, and that's why we all need to be paying attention to this, because this is clearly an issue where you need to be thinking about the weakest link. It doesn't matter if you protect 99% of your network. If the 1% is vulnerable, they'll come through the 1%, you got a big problem. So considering this broad definition of information assurance, what we're going to focus on, including modeling and simulation, is certification for compliance with DoD security requirements. Some of you are specifically going to be asked to do that. And accreditation for operation. So the big issue in the past is that we had systems that were certified and accredited as independent systems, but the minute we connected them together, we ended up with redundant certification, and now we want to have a process that sort of considers the whole thing. It considers certification and accreditation from not just at the system level, but at the system of systems level. So our solution is network-centric certification and accreditation. This is definitely a slide I'm not going to read to you, but you can look online for this definition of what the gig actually is, and essentially it's just all these pieces that are connected that involve information. Remember that involve data or information. Let me skip ahead to this second slide because I think it's more meaningful. Here we talk about these three bullets. This is really what you need to know. When you talk about the gig, you're talking about transmission, storage, and processing. That's what those three bullets mean. It's all of it. So you're going to have databases, you're going to have different data sources, you're going to have live data coming in, you're going to have stored data, you're going to have computed data. It's all going to be there. You're going to be transmitting this stuff from one place to another. You're going to be processing it in one place or another. When we get to talk about software development, we're going to talk about distributed processing. This is where cloud computing really comes in. Some of us think of cloud computing as, oh, it's just sort of like storage on the internet. It's a lot more than that. And as it translates into what the gig actually is, you start to have an appreciation for why some of these IA issues are so critical to us. Now I'm going to make this another one of those slides that there's no way you can read. I will make a a version of this available to you that you can look at offline in a font that you can actually read. But it'll give you a snapshot of what we're talking about when we're talking about building and operating a trusted information network. All these different pieces of how it's organized, how it's enabled, the different pieces of management, the different pieces of certification. It's all on this picture, and you can kind of see how all the pieces fit together. I'm just going to give you a few references here for the sorts of things that we're talking about. The DoD Directives 8500 series is specifically talking about these sorts of things, and a lot of it is in the Acquisition Modeling and Simulation Master Plan as well. They clearly talk about information assurance, but I'll leave it to you to look at how deep you want to go into this. Notice the last link is diacap.net, where all the documents are found, and we're going to just give you a high-level view of DIACAP in the rest of this briefing. So DIACAP establishes a standard for how it is we're going to do this, and it supersedes all the old stuff, and really, it's really important. You can't operate on the gig if you're not doing this, so you need to really understand it. You can build the coolest thing in the world for your modeling and simulation community, and if it doesn't conform to these standards and follow these procedures, you're not going to operate it on the network. So that's going to be a huge problem. And since all of the personal computers typically that we're running training systems and analysis systems and whatnot are all connected to the gig, I can't even hand you a disk and run it. It's not even a matter of keeping it on the gig. You can't operate it at all. It's dead in the water. So you really need to understand how important this really is. And you can also keep in mind that DIACAP, this process, goes throughout the life cycle of the entire product. So you don't just go through DIACAP certification, throw your product out on the street, because that product now is going to have a life cycle, particularly if it's software. It's going to be revised. You're going to have to keep up your DIACAP certification to make sure that no changes that you've made have now violated information assurance standards. So the objectives are to give a standard approach, and we're going to have we're going to manage and disseminate standards and guidelines on design, implementation, configuration, validation, operational sustainment, and reporting. We'll kind of look at all those things here in the remainder of these slides. So here's the process overview, and you're going to look at initiate and plan for information assurance. And then you think about implementing and validating your assigned IA controls. You've got a DIACAP package. We'll talk about what that is. You're going to make certification, determination, and accreditation decisions. Maintain authorization to operate and conduct reviews. This is through the life cycle. And then at the end of this, you're going to have a decommission. So you might, if you're already seeing a parallel between this and what we learned about when we talked about JSIDs and the acquisition process, they lay on top of each other. This all goes from the birth to death of every program. There, you have an idea in acquisition, you get money for it, you start to build it, you got to plan your IA in the middle of this thing. You're going to go all the way through the entire thing, and then when you're going to decommission on the back end, it parallels acquisition. So what you really need to get out of this is that we're really talking about managing a certification and accreditation process. We're managing risk to the system's operation. And the system is the gig. It's the whole thing, because anytime anything is connected, we can't simply talk about any part anymore, because any part that has the weakest vulnerability can be exploited. Think about the aviation system. This is why the FAA applies rules that are as stringent for small regional airports as they are for LaGuardia. There's a reason for that, because everything has to be reasonably risk managed. Otherwise, you ignore the weak stuff, and that's how something can get into the system. So you're asking, is the residual risk acceptable? So I'm asking here, my question is, what you see on the bottom is risk equals a threat times a vulnerability times a consequence. So you're looking at a threat, the threat of some cyber attack, some denial of service issue, could be an accident, could be the removal of sensitive data, sensitive personal data. What is the vulnerability? How would that actually happen, and how real is it that it might actually occur? And if it should occur, what's the consequence? usually measure that in dollars. So what would be the consequence of a thumb drive with personal information being leaked? What's the consequence of that? We should be able to know that, and this is how we make risk-based decisions that link back into the DICAP process. Now, part of talking about that consequence that we just mentioned is the importance of the information in the information system relative to the achievement of DoD goals and objectives. So clearly, not all information is equal, even though it's all sitting on the gig. Most of the stuff that I deal with it's important to me, but it's not important to of mission importance to what the DoD is doing right now. So we need to be able to separate those things apart. And the way we do this is Department of Defense has defined 3 mission assurance categories, 1, 2, and 3. So let's take a look at those. MAC 1 is system handling information that is determined to be vital to the operational readiness or mission effectiveness of deployed and contingency forces. So when you're talking about when you guys are in a deployed setting and there is information moving around of where soldiers and Marines are going to be tomorrow, where we're going to operate, what we're going to do, that's MAC 1 level assurance, because a leak of that sort of information is going to probably cost somebody their life. It's the very, very top level of importance. Now, MAC 2 is a little less important. It's important to the support of deployed and contingency forces, but it's not what they're actually doing right now. So things that have to do with logistics information, supply, things of that nature are probably in the MAC level 2 category. They're important, and they're going to seriously impact mission effectiveness or operational readiness if it's compromised, but not at the same level as MAC 1. And then, of course, there's MAC 3, which is where most of us are going to live. And for most of us, it's even a stretch to call us MAC 3. But it's necessary for the conduct of day-to-day business, but it does not materially affect the support to deployed or contingency forces in the short term. So everything we do in S&T and other things like that, we're all down at MAC 3. And most of what's going on is really in MAC 3. Most of what we're going to talk about in our program is going to be MAC 3. Doesn't mean it's not important, just means it's not at 1 or 2. So just know that there's a difference. We don't treat all information the same. And then, of course, there's confidentiality level, where we talk about classified, and then the different levels of classification. So we understand that there's layers inside of that, and we have very rigorous protective measures. Then we have sensitive data that we don't put in actual classified. It's not, you don't have to have a clearance to actually see it, but you ever see a lot of like FOUO type information will probably fall into the sensitive area. That's where you want to do above best practices. You want to take every effort to keep that information from just being thrown on the internet, which is, of course, our third category, which is public. Information cleared for public release, posted on your website, do whatever you want. We want to do industry best practices on those things, but really not anything further than that. So now what you want to do is you want to figure out what your IA controls are going to be based on the MAC level and the confidentiality level. Those two things are related, but not exactly the same thing. You want to look at integrity, availability, and confidentiality. You want your controls to be testable, measurable, assignable, and accountable. Because what's the point of doing it if they're not? Then it's what we call good intentions. Gee, I sure intended to not let that information get out, but I had no way of actually measuring that I was doing anything that was going to have any impact on that. So the control subject areas that we're interested in are security design and configuration, identification and authentication, how are people authenticating to get into the system, the computing environment, boundary defense. This would be like how your network operations center is actually put together. And then there's physical and environmental issues, personnel, making sure. One of the things that we recognize in IA early on is that the social side of it is probably as critical, if not more critical, than anything else. That is making sure that your people are properly trained, that you're protected from an insider event where somebody maliciously, who has authorization to get onto your network, maliciously takes information and does something with it, continuity and vulnerability and incident management. Now you also need to understand that there's something called inheritance. Remember, all the stuff is connected. So you have these original systems, and they all have their own IA controls. Well, this is a benefit of the DICAP, is that we actually can document when there's a receiving system. And so much of what we do, and you're going to learn more about this when we get into how we build software and modeling and simulation, it very rarely, if ever, starts from the ground up. We're receiving systems. We're building new systems that are using components of other systems. You inherit the IA issues from those. So we allow the sharing of IA controls for validation and compliance status, because if we do DIACAP right, you can inherit the good stuff that you want to inherit from existing systems. That's really important. That's a feature. That's a feature of DIACAP, something that you want to leverage if you can. So roles and responsibilities, we're not going to go through all of these, but just some key people that you might be. You might be some of these people at some point, and you'll have other responsibilities, but your information assurance responsibilities as it relates to DIACAP is here, where the DAA, the Designated Accrediting Authority, is that's the top dog who does the actual accrediting of the information system. You might be the program manager or the system manager who has to implement DIACAP for the assigned information system, and so you're reporting to the DAA. The DAA is going to certify what you would do. You might also be the user rep who represents the operational interests of the user community. So you want to be careful making sure if we're talking about a simulation system that we're going to be distributing to individual Marines or sailors or soldiers or airmen, you might want to represent those people and say, hey, this is the operating environment these people are on. These people are going to be using iPads for this. Well, that's important to know. Now, my DIACAP plan has to take that into consideration. You have an information assurance manager who's responsible for information assurance for the information assurance program and supports the implementation. That person would work for the program manager or the system manager. There's also the information assurance officer who ensures appropriate information assurance posture is maintained. So you may or may not have all these people, but these are the sorts of folks that you're going to run to in your program. And you'll probably inherit the people when you move into an operation. So now we're getting into the nuts and bolts of the process that we call DIACAP. And step number one is initiate and plan information assurance for certification and accreditation. So what we're talking about here is you're going to be assigning the IA controls that we just talked about. You're going to be monitoring your implementation status. Looking at responsible entities, who's going to be responsible for what resources do you have. You're going to be putting things on like a POA&M so that you can chart things out, when things are going to happen. This is mainly the planning stage. You're just getting things, you're setting up the posture so that you can be DIACAP compliant. Activity 2 is going to be implement and validate your assigned IA controls. So you're going to be your procedures are going to be looking at the requisite preparatory steps and conditions, looking at the actual validation steps, what you're actually going to be doing, what are your expected results, what are the criteria. You got to set your measurements here. So you're really building the plan here. So this is where you're really building. I just mentioned the POA&M in step 1. This is where you flesh out the entire thing. You've got all the activities. At this point, everybody knows what they're doing, when they're doing it, when it's expected, and how it's going to be measured. So now process activity 3 has to do with the actual certification, determination, and accreditation decision. The decision which is actually made by the DAA, which we talked about before. And it's based on the scorecard, sort of like the checklist of all the things that you're doing to determine the information assurance. Your accreditation is for a maximum of 3 years. The interim authorization to operate, you don't have to go through the entire process to initially get your product on the network, but the interim authorization goes for 180 days, and you can possibly get you can get an extension, but that's not typically done. Then you get interim authorization to test, because a lot of times you don't even know that you're going to meet IA standards until you're able to test it. So that's a special case, but we don't say we're testing as a way to circumvent the process to get our things out into the network so we can do our work. The testing is really meant to be testing, and the actual accreditation is immediate for any number of. The denial of authorization to operate is immediate for any number of inadequate designs, any lack of security, failure implement controls, etc. It doesn't mean you're permanently denied. It just means you have to cycle back through. It's kind of a do-over. You go back into the process, you go through your checks again, and you go up for certification. So it's not, hey, wait a minute, I'll just go fix that and we'll just continue on. You kind of have to go back and go back through the process. Then there's process activity 4, which is basically maintenance. This is really the main thing you want to get out of this is once you're certified, you're not done. In fact, that's just the beginning. You're now going to have to maintain this thing throughout. You have to maintain your posture through the entire life cycle of this particular product. You're conducting reviews. You're going to be continually reviewed for your certification to make sure that you are maintaining things appropriately. Now, the reason why decommission is of interest in any way to us in DIACAP is because of what we talked about before, inheritance. So I may be decommissioning a system, but I may have other systems on the network that have inherited components from the thing you're decommissioning. So when you decommission it, knowing what the impacts are of those other things is really the whole point of this. So you want to make sure. You also want to make sure you remove the IA scorecards and POA&Ms from the tracking systems because we don't want to waste time, in looking at and evaluating systems that are really no longer operational. Now, the main thing you want to know about DIACAP, you're probably saying to yourself, gee, what did I really learn from this? Because you can't be specific about exactly what you're doing. And of course, you can't because every system is different. So, and that's why that's what the importance of that first activity, which is the planning piece, which is making a determination of what exactly are going to be the appropriate activities for this particular information system that's going to make sure that we have information assurance of the entire gig as a result. You think about it, we could be talking about a database, we could be talking about a distributed simulation that's going to run on lots of different machines, we could be talking about a web-based application, we could be talking about anything. I can't give you a checklist, this is what we do for all systems because they're not going to apply to everything. So just understanding what the purpose is, what the objectives are, what the components are, understand that it's about risk management, which is going to talk about your MAC level and your confidentiality level, which is going to determine your IA controls. These are the main things you want to get out of DIACAP. There's a lot more information at the website, so if this is too vague for you, and it probably is, go to the DIACAP website and you can learn some more. There's some examples there. Example documentation, pretty much everything you need to be DIACAP compliant on whatever product you happen to be working on. So that's what we're going to talk about for DIACAP and information assurance. I know it's really brief and high level, but my main objective here again is with most things in this section is to give you a high level of comfort with the words and what they mean, what the acronyms are, and what these things actually do for us, so that when you find yourself out there in program management function, it's not entirely new to you.